Cold fluorescent lights flickered above courtroom 6B as a single mother stood trembling at the wooden podium, clutching a worn folder pressed tight against her chest. Across the room, two wealthy twins in tailored navy suits rolled their eyes, confident the hearing would end in their favor. But the judge's expression shifted the moment he opened the folder, because inside it was a truth older, heavier, and far more dangerous than anyone expected. Sarah Harper had walked into court that morning, prepared for another battle she never chose. A single mother, exhausted from years of working double shifts in Manhattan and fighting systems designed to overlook women like her. She faced Daniel and Marcus Whitford, heirs to a rich family accustomed to winning. What none of them knew was that hidden among Sarah's papers was a secret from the past that tied their lives together in a way the twins would never have imagined. As the judge read the final page and lifted his eyes, the room shifted from arrogance to shock, because what Sarah revealed that morning wasn't just evidence, it was a revelation that would test blood, loyalty, forgiveness, and the meaning of family. A revelation that would change their lives forever. Before we begin this emotional story, tell us in the comments from which city you are watching, and don't forget to leave your like to keep following us. Sarah stepped into courtroom 6B with the careful breath of someone walking into a storm. The heavy oak doors closed behind her, sealing in the quiet tension that clung to the air. Her fingers pressed around an old yellow folder, creased, softened, and guarded like a fragile piece of her past. Inside it was the secret she had vowed never to expose, the one thing powerful enough to reshape the future of her daughter. The judge glanced up as she approached the front. "Ms. Harper, you may come forward." His tone was neutral, but his eyes carried the weight of expectation. Sarah nodded once and stepped toward the stand, her heels clicking softly against the polished floor. On her left sat Daniel and Marcus Whitford, the wealthy twins whose reputation filled entire columns of Manhattan business news. Both wore immaculate suits, identical navy, identical silk ties, identical expressions of impatience. When she walked past them, Marcus let out a quiet laugh, nudging his brother as if she were an inconvenience rather than a woman fighting for her child. Their reaction rippled across the courtroom, but Sarah kept her gaze forward. She placed the worn folder gently on the wooden surface. Her breath hovered in her chest before she finally opened it. The papers inside trembled at the edges, no longer from fear, but from the weight of years spent hidden. People shifted in their seats, sensing something significant. The twins leaned back, relaxed, almost amused. They had no idea. "Your Honor," Sarah said softly, meeting the judge's eyes. "Before any decision is made, the court needs to see this." She slid the first document toward him. The judge's hands paused over it, his brows slowly knitting together as he scanned the page. Daniel sat up straighter. Marcus's smirk faltered. Every sound in the room thinned to silence as Sarah waited, hope and dread woven tightly in her chest, while the judge read the words that had the power to shatter the facade the twins had built. The judge reread the document, slower this time, his jaw tightening with each line. Sarah could feel the shifting energy in the room, like the moment before a subway train screeches into the station. She kept her hands folded, though her fingertips tingled with nerves she refused to show. Daniel finally broke the silence. "What is this supposed to mean?" His voice carried an edge of disbelief, but beneath it was something sharper: fear. Marcus leaned in, trying to catch a glimpse of the paper, his confidence unraveling in small, involuntary twitches of his eyebrows. The judge raised a hand. "Gentlemen, you will remain silent until I address you." His tone cut through their protest before it could form. Sarah didn't look at the twins. Instead, she kept her eyes on the judge, watching the moment he reached the final paragraph. His posture changed, straightened, stiffened. Then he slowly exhaled. "Ms. Harper," he said, "how long have you had this?" 14 years, she answered. Her voice didn't waver, though her chest tightened at the memory of the night she'd first held that truth in shaking hands. "I kept it because I wanted my daughter to grow up without the chaos that comes with this." Marcus let out a harsh whisper. "This is impossible." Sarah finally turned toward them. No, it was impossible to ignore any longer. Her words weren't sharp, just tired, honest, worn the way only a single mother's battles could be worn. The courtroom watched her with a new kind of attention, one that tasted like sympathy mixed with curiosity. The judge tapped his pen once, signaling that something far bigger was unfolding. "If what you've presented is valid," he said, "it changes the structure of this entire case." Daniel's breath hitched. "Your Honor, she's lying. She has to be." Sarah didn't blink. She reached into the folder again, pulling out a second document, thicker, sealed in a plastic sleeve, untouched by time. "This," she said quietly, "confirms the first." Everything in the courtroom stilled as she placed it on the judge's bench, another truth waiting to detonate. The judge slid on his reading glasses, unfolding the plastic sleeve with deliberate care. The subtle crinkle of the material echoed through the courtroom like a warning. Sarah stood still, her posture steady, though her pulse pressed hard against her throat. She had waited 14 years for this moment, yet now that it was here, the air felt unbearably tight. As the judge scanned the second document, Daniel shifted uncomfortably, his polished shoe tapping against the floor. Marcus tried to mask his growing anxiety by adjusting his tie, but his hand shook slightly. For men raised inside a rich family, shielded from consequences, the vulnerability creeping into their faces was new, and it unsettled them. "What exactly is that?" Marcus asked, attempting a confident tone, but it fractured halfway through the sentence. Sarah didn't look at him. Her focus stayed on the judge, on the faint flicker of recognition passing through his eyes as he reached the signature at the bottom of the page. He lifted the document, then looked at Sarah with a seriousness that rooted her to the spot. "This is substantial," he said, voice low. "Where did you obtain it?" "My daughter's father sent it to me before he died," she replied. A heaviness settled in the room. He wanted her to know the truth one day. "I wasn't ready then. I didn't think I ever would be." Daniel's face drained of color. "Her father, he wasn't involved with us. This doesn't make any sense." Sarah finally met his eyes. "You were involved with him more than you realize." A murmur rippled through the courtroom. Even the clerk looked up from her keyboard. Marcus leaned forward, voice tight. "What are you implying?" Sarah opened the folder one last time. Inside was a photograph, old, slightly faded, taken during a charity gala in Chicago. In it, the twins stood beside a man whose resemblance to her daughter was undeniable. She placed the photo down gently. "I'm implying," she said, her voice barely above a breath, "that you knew him far better than you admit." The judge's hand froze above his desk, suspended in a moment that promised to unravel everything. The photograph lay between them, like a quiet explosion. The judge leaned closer, studying the faces with narrowed eyes. Sarah could see the exact second recognition struck him. His chin lifted, his brows tightened, and he exhaled slowly, as if something heavy had just fallen into place. Daniel swallowed hard. "That proves nothing," he muttered, but the tremor in his voice betrayed him. Marcus didn't speak at all. His eyes stayed locked on the man in the middle of the photo. His fingers twitched once on the tabletop, then stilled, as if gripping something invisible. Sarah drew in a careful breath. "There's more. The man in that picture. His name was Michael Grant." At the mention of the name, both twins stiffened. The judge noticed. Sarah continued, her voice softer now, carrying a deeper ache. "He worked security at one of your hotels in Chicago. He started as a night guard. Quiet. Kind. The only person who helped me during the months I was homeless with a newborn." A flicker of memory passed through her eyes. Fluorescent lights of a lobby, the bitterness of cold wind against baby skin, the warmth of a borrowed coat. Marcus shifted. He never mentioned a child. "He didn't know at first," Sarah said. "I was terrified. I didn't tell anyone, not even him. By the time I gathered the courage, he'd already disappeared." Her voice caught, but didn't break. "I searched for him. Years later, he reached out, sick, scared, wanting to put something in writing for our daughter. He didn't know he was dying yet." The judge tapped the photo once, deep in thought. "And what does this have to do with the Whitford family?" Sarah hesitated, her fingers brushing the edge of the folder. "You already know," she said gently. "But I'll say it." She pulled out one final sheet, folded, fragile, the ink softened by time. "Michael Grant," she whispered, laying it before the judge, was their half-brother. The twins both froze, shock, denial, and a buried pain flickering through their faces as the truth hovered heavily between them. A stunned silence rippled through courtroom 6B, thick enough to still even the hum of the air vents. The judge leaned back slowly, as if needing distance from the truth laid before him. "Half-brother," he repeated under his breath, tasting the revelation like something bitter and undeniable. Daniel's mouth opened, but he found no words. Marcus blinked hard, his expression twisting between disbelief and wounded pride. The Whitford family empire was built on image, immaculate, controlled, spotless, and now a buried truth had surfaced through a single mother they'd barely acknowledged. Sarah kept her posture steady, though the weight of the moment pressed heavily against her ribs. "Michael never wanted anything from you," she said softly. "He didn't even know his father until much later. When he finally reached out, he was met with silence." Daniel flinched. Marcus looked away. The judge cleared his throat. "According to this document," he said, lifting the letter Michael had written, "your father admitted in writing that Michael Grant was biologically his son." He scanned the next lines, brows knitting together, and he expressed regret for keeping it hidden. Whispers filled the courtroom. Even the attorney for the Whitfords leaned closer, panic flickering across her face. Marcus spoke first, voice strained. "Why didn't he tell us? Why hide this for decades?" Sarah answered gently, "Because secrets become easier to keep than to face. He grew up without anyone. He didn't want your father's money, just acknowledgement, just to know he wasn't invisible." Daniel's shoulders tightened. "So this is about inheritance? You think your daughter deserves a part of the estate?" Sarah shook her head. "This isn't about a rich family or their wealth. It's about my daughter's identity. She deserves to know where she comes from. And you deserve to know the brother you lost before you ever met him." The words hung painfully in the air. The judge tapped his pen once. "This changes the scope of the petition entirely." Everyone leaned in. Something was coming. Sarah's breath caught as the judge prepared to speak. The courtroom poised on the edge of a decision that would shift all of their lives. The judge placed the documents carefully in a neat stack, as though arranging pieces of a fragile truth. His gaze moved from Sarah to the twins, weighing not just evidence but years of silence, fractures and hidden pain. The courtroom felt smaller now, walls closing in around emotions none of them had expected to confront. "Given the new information," he began, "the petition for guardianship and the objections filed by the Whitford family must be reconsidered." He paused, letting the weight of the sentence settle. "This case is no longer about simple custody. It involves lineage, acknowledgement, and responsibilities long ignored." Marcus rubbed his face, the first sign that his certainty had collapsed. Daniel looked at Sarah, not with arrogance this time, but with something almost human, almost vulnerable. "Why did you bring this now?" he asked quietly. "Why not let the past stay buried?" Sarah met his stare without anger. "Because my daughter is getting older. She asks questions. She deserves honest answers, not shadows. And I'm tired of protecting everyone else from the truth while carrying it alone." Her voice wasn't confrontational. It was weary, authentic, the tone of someone who had spent years surviving what others never had to face. The judge gestured toward the photo. "You two lost a brother without ever knowing him. Ms. Harper's daughter lost a father without knowing who he truly was. Perhaps this moment is an opportunity for correction." For a second, something broke open in Marcus's face, grief, sharp and unguarded. "He looked like us," he whispered, staring at the man in the photo. "How did we never see it?" Daniel lowered his gaze, voice tight. "We would have wanted to meet him, even if our father didn't." Sarah swallowed, emotion tightening her throat. "He hoped you'd say that one day." The judge leaned forward. "Until I make a ruling, I'm ordering a temporary visitation schedule. The child deserves stability and clarity." The twins straightened, startled. Sarah exhaled, unsure whether to feel relief or fear, as the next chapter none of them expected began to take shape in the judge's hands. When the judge adjourned for a short recess, the courtroom emptied in hesitant fragments, attorneys whispering, clerks carrying stacks of files, strangers exchanging glances as if they had witnessed something far more intimate than a legal dispute. Sarah remained seated for a moment, her hands resting quietly on the folder that had carried 14 years of silence. She finally allowed herself one slow breath, feeling the tremor in her chest settle. Daniel and Marcus hesitated near the aisle, unsure whether to leave or approach her. It was Marcus who stepped forward first, awkward in a way that felt foreign to him. "Sarah," he said, voice low, "we didn't know about any of it." She nodded once. "I never expected you to." Daniel shifted his weight, eyes flicking toward the photo still resting on the judge's bench. He really was our brother. The question wasn't defensive this time. It carried a softness, a dawning grief. "Yes," Sarah said gently, "and he cared about you both more than you'll ever know. He admired you from afar. He kept newspaper clippings, pictures, anything he could find." She paused. It meant something to him. The twins exchanged a glance that held more emotion than either wanted to show in public. Daniel wiped his palm against his suit pants, as if grounding himself. "We want to meet her," he said suddenly. "Your daughter, if you'll allow it." Sarah's breath caught, not in fear but in the fragile hope she had tried to suppress. "One step at a time," she said softly. "She's been through a lot. We all have." Marcus nodded. "We're not trying to take her from you. We just want to know who we lost, and maybe who we still have." Before Sarah could respond, the bailiff opened the door again. "Court back in session," he called out. The three of them turned toward the courtroom's heart, each carrying a new weight, and the faintest outline of something almost like possibility as they stepped back inside to hear the judge's final decision. When the judge returned with his final ruling, the courtroom fell into a stillness that felt almost sacred. His voice carried none of the earlier tension, only a calm, deliberate clarity. He granted Sarah full custodial rights, recognizing the stability she had fought to build, but he also approved a structured visitation plan for the twins, not as adversaries, but as newfound uncles seeking connection rather than control. It was a decision that honored truth, lineage, and the fragile steps toward healing. Outside the courthouse, a soft winter breeze moved through the city streets. Sarah walked out holding the same worn folder she had carried in, but it felt lighter now, as if the weight inside had finally released. Daniel and Marcus approached her on the steps, not with arrogance, but with a hesitancy that made them look younger, almost unsure. They didn't speak at first. Instead, Marcus handed her the photograph the judge had returned, now resting inside a simple protective cover. "We'd like to frame this," he said quietly, "in our home, to remember him. And to honor her too." Sarah felt something loosen in her chest, a thread of grief untying itself. "She'll want to hear about him," she replied. "Not the stories I can tell, the ones only you know." For the first time, Daniel offered a genuine smile. Not polished, not rehearsed, just human. "Then we'll start with that," he said, "whenever you're ready." Months later, the epilogue of their journey took shape inside a small community center near the Hudson River. A new program plaque hung on the wall, the Michael Grant Youth Fund, created by the Whitford brothers, inspired by a man they never knew, but wished they had. Sarah stood with her daughter beneath the plaque, tears gathering softly as light from the tall windows washed over the name. Healing didn't erase the past, but it rewrote what the future could look like. Through honesty, courage, and the unsteady grace of second chances, they had built something none of them expected. A family born not from blood alone, but from truth, forgiveness, and the willingness to begin again. Thank you for staying with us until the end of this heart-touching story. Tell us in the comments which moment touched you the most. Subscribe and turn on the bell to receive more stories that inspire and transform. Leave a like if you believe in the invisible strength of kindness, dignity, and family. And thank you for being part of this community that believes in stories with soul.